Hey everyone, welcome to another video. Today we're going to be taking a look at my FC26, excuse me, it's a new year. My settings for FC26. I've been getting this request quite a lot. I've had a lot of people, particularly on PC, saying they've had their game be very stuttery, very unoptimized. So we're going to be taking a look at everything I do. We're going to start off with the in-game settings that are applicable for everyone, and we're going to end off with what I do for PC side. So if you're console, stick around for the first bit. If you're PC, just stick around for the whole video if you like. Most of these are going to be pretty much exactly the same for last year, but there are a couple new display settings that we're going to have to talk about what they do. So, really quickly, what are we at? This is the wrong menu. I think we've got, it says 9 losses. A couple of them have been hacked or controller disconnects, so it's probably more like 5. But it played 44 wins, so I feel like we've played enough of this game for now to actually put out the settings video. I didn't want to put it out right away I wanted to make sure they were right. But these have been very consistent. I haven't had any issues with them. And I do feel like they're the fastest I've been able to get, most responsive. So we'll go through here. Starting off with the gameplay, these are going to be somewhat preference, but what I'm using. Precision, I think, is going to be important. I found it a little frustrating. The goalkeepers are very powerful, but I still do think it's going to be the best way to go. It's going to be worth learning this year, especially if the goalkeepers are going to be effective like that. These are our preference. I've got semi in most of them. You can do maybe assisted for the ground pass. I like choosing power. I like being able to, choose whether it's a cross or a lob if I have to, clear the ball at the side of the box or something, instead of it just dumping it in the box all the time. So I've got semi just for, a little bit more control on all that. Pass receiver lock late, just so I've got even more control to decide where the ball's going to go to, just in case I need to make a decision towards the end. Position pass sensitivity, that's going to be you hold L2 or LT and then triangle or Y for, those precision through balls. I like having them be more accurate, and more up to me. Advanced or tactical is up to you. I like advanced because it's going to be your own decision between bruiser or sand tackle. I get really frustrated when the game takes my control away, so if it does the other one and commits a foul, I'm going to feel like that's not on me. So I like being able to make the decision myself. Professional fouls on. This is better interceptions. This I have manual because last year I only tend to have one aerially dominant center back, and the rest of the team is 6 foot and under, so a lot of 5'7" players. So only having the one center back, I want to make sure I'm able to control them on corners, and last year it would switch it away from that player every single time. So defending corners, I want to make sure I'm just controlling the one guy who's getting the air for me, and it doesn't switch off of him. That's the main reason. Auto switching, I don't even have, but I think none is going to be the best, so the game's not just dragging your player continuously. This is one where I think it is kind of personal preference. I've done player relative since I've played this game since a kid, and it's been almost 2 decades now. Wow. So it's just what I'm used to. Ball relative can be a little bit quicker to get a player closer to the ball, but also the ball moves more than your players move. So this is a little bit easier, whereas the ball, if it gets kicked a great distance, then you're kind of considering, okay, the ball's over here, where is that going to change, I have to move my right stick now. So this is a little bit easier, I think. This can be faster in certain situations, but worse in others. It's up to you. Switching sensitivity is going to be kind of up to your controller, and the stick drift, I've got it on 3. It's what it was last year. It feels the same. That's kind of up to how many players you've got in the back and exactly how precise to switch which one you're going to with the right stick. 3 is where I found the best place to go for that. Reaction time calibration, you definitely want to make sure you've got off. That's another thing that can kind of add input lag. It's the switching you to the player that was indicated when you initially thought about switching. So when it's auto, or when the triangle's above their head, and then it's you want to press LB for this guy or L1 for this guy, and then the indicator switches to somebody else. There's a little bit of time where it switches to somebody else's head, but it'll still go to the first person's player because the game is considering you think it didn't actually change player, or you didn't have enough time to realize it was going to another player. I've got that off because I think my reactions are good enough. This I definitely recommend having off for any competitive sense. Everything else here I think is pretty unnecessary to kind of cover. Vibration controls and all that. Match has nothing to do with competitive, really. My camera settings, so I've got the competitive camera off. We'll kind of consider that more throughout the year, but at the beginning, I just want to learn the gameplay and not really camera stuff. I use co-op, and I'm on 20 height 0 zoom, so the camera is as far away as possible. I want to see as much of the field as I can because a lot of people think that's going to be worse for dribbling, and maybe, but I don't really feel better when I move the camera more closer to the ball. And I want to know exactly where the attack's going, where the attack should be going, what I need to be covering for defense, all that kind of stuff. So seeing everything is very important for me. Nothing else in here I think is relevant this year. They took away some settings, which is interesting. Visual, Go through this really quickly. Scrolling lineups and all of it. So these are all just like personal preference, what like UI indicators are popping up on screen. You can read through mine if you want to just copy mine. Anything important in here? I think this is massive. Turn user-controlled team celebrations on. Don't leave it to the opponent. Don't let them frustrate you. Do you have any need to know if your opponent's grittying? You literally do not. It is not important. If it frustrates you and you can turn this on and you don't, you're just letting yourself get tilted. There's no reason for it. So definitely user-controlled. Precision pass stuff I do use sometimes, and I like having that on. That's my radar settings. I don't think... Oh, and I've got Stadium Shadows on, Player Shadows... Or Stadium Shadows off, Player Shadows on. That's a new setting this year. Definitely turn the shadows off. There's no reason to have them on. They're frustrating for everybody, I think. That's my audio settings, if you want to copy mine. I've got nothing on in here, I think, that's unique. Kind of just the defaults. These are going to be the two important ones. Mostly, okay, so the graphics I've just got completely low. I'll go through that real quick. Just the low preset turns everything as low as it can immediately. I'm a competitive gamer. I need the input lag to be as low as possible for all the dribbling that I do and all of that stuff. I just need the responsiveness, so I don't care if the grass quality is high or I can see the crowd better. I don't really care if it's more or less blurry. And I also need these kind of low because I'm a streamer, so it helps the PC have more resources for content creation stuff. But yeah, just low. If you play career mode and you want it prettier, that's fine. If you're doing like Ultimate Team, definitely have it low. I don't think there's any reason to do anything higher. This is going to be an important one. If you just want to copy mine, this is what I've got, but it will kind of depend on some stuff. So we're going to talk about borderless first. Full screen was the best on PC for the longest time, for decades and decades. Rendered borderless is better now if you have an Nvidia GPU and you use a third-party application called Riva Tuner Statistics Server, and you turn on NVIDIA Reflex. If you don't use that third-party app, if you don't have an NVIDIA GPU and turn all that on, still do full screen. Or test between the two. Windowed is nice for streaming because I can like pull a, I don't have to Alt-Tab and wait like 3 seconds for the game to exit to, show something on screen. So it's nice for creation, but it is also genuinely, aside from that, it is literally faster. It's just better now with that third-party app. So we're going to talk about that because that's PC specific at the end. If you're on console, I think it's just full screen. I don't even know if you've got a choice here, actually. It's just, you're on console. You don't have any other screens to display, really. But on PC, this is, do your own testing if you have a different GPU. Full screen's probably going to be better unless you do what I'm talking about. So I've got rendered borderless. It says frame rate unlimited. This is not true. I've got it locked to 130. That's what that RTSS app that I'm talking about is doing. So again, we'll get to that. But I've got mine limited at 130. VSync off. VSync is just screen tearing. So if you've got like a picture up here and then there's a little cut so that there's a line running through the middle of your screen, that's called screen tearing. That's when you want to consider VSync settings. G-Sync, which is a VSync specific setting to NVIDIA, or FreeSync, which is specific to AMD cards. Can be better if you're using like very high-end graphic settings, if you want some of these settings higher, or if you're using 1440p or 4K. I'm just on 1080p. I want everything as responsive as possible. I've got no screen tearing. I've got no need for VSync. But it can be better at higher resolution settings, depending on some stuff. That's all dependent. But for general, like just competitiveness, and if you've got maybe a lower end but faster refresh rate monitor, no reason for VSync to be on ever. This will only ever add input lag. G-Sync can... depends, but again, G-Sync's in a different menu anyway. V-Sync can only ever add input lag. But again, if you're experiencing screen tearing, it is really annoying. That's the only time it ever matters. Cutscene preference, I definitely think you want half frame rate. No reason to leave your, device running faster for just displaying cutscenes. These are the new settings down here. Render scale, DRS, and dynamic resolution FPS target. What these do is... Okay, so I've got 130 FPS. Like I said, it's a different application actually limiting my frames. But it's 130 over there. That's the target I want, 130. If ever my PC is struggling and stuttering and just not able to generate the 130 frames, it can drop to 120, it can drop to 60, whatever's going on. It's just, this game's poorly optimized. It happens. This is basically a setting to say, would you rather drop your FPS like any other normal game or a normal instance would? Would you rather drop your frames? Or would you rather drop your screen's resolution? So that's, instead of losing frames, you lose 1080p. Now, it's not directly losing, as I understand, it's not directly losing 1080p because it's rendered, like, it is already rendered and then it's just changing after. So it's a high, it's not like it drops to 720p, you know, it's 90% of 1080p that's already been rendered and then it scales. So it's prettier than a normal, like, drop in resolution. These are going to be device specific, and I wish I could give you more of an indication of which way to go. I'm using all my settings off, and my PC is very easy. It's very easy to run 1080p. It's not going to be very frequently that I'm going to need to drop my resolution in order to keep my frames, but I've got this little buffer in case it does happen. This is particularly useful when, like, the game stutters right now as it's doing after kickoff when you leave a menu. So, like, as you leave team management and just go back into the game, it's very framey, it's very stuttery. This is helping additionally with that, because the game's poorly optimized, particularly I think on PC for that stuff. So definitely worth having this on. Keep your target, keep this 130, whatever you've got your frames at up here. So whether you're actually limiting it or using the other app, you want this setting to be the same, so same number there. But then this is going to be, I've got a friend, one of my longtime viewers who's very techie, knows a lot about this stuff. I think they're using a 1440p or a 4K, it might be a 4K monitor. They've got this setting at 60, but it's because they're doing, like, again, it's a 4K monitor, it's much higher settings. They're using G-Sync to kind of get everything running better for them. But that's the higher end display graphical stuff. For me, I don't need, like, it's not going to drop much, so I don't need the render scale up, like, too low or down too low. But for them, because it's jumping between, or because it's got to produce a much higher quality image, then having this down to keep the frames up is going to be very important. And again, having this at 60 for that is not going to be like a true 60% of 4K. It's going to be prettier. So if you are having issues, I'd say start trying to drop this more and more and more if you can't keep your frames. If you can keep your frames, not going to be too big of a deal. Hopefully that all did make sense. This is, again, one of the new settings, and that's kind of complicated. That's what DRS does, and this is what I've got mine optimized at for myself. We want to talk about why 130 FPS. Again, that friend has some testing tools that I don't, and found that the 135 is almost stable, but probably not worth doing. 140 and up, or for whatever reason, 140 FPS is the cutoff. Game is very poorly optimized at that point. I want to explain this. There are people who develop, like, indie games, and I've heard it explained to me that physics can generally be tied to the frame rate. So if you've got, like, a character's run speed in your game, and you develop the game at 30 FPS, and then somebody plays it at 60 FPS, and you don't account for this, it's pretty easy to fix, but you have to actually fix it. Generally speaking, if it's coded at 30 FPS and then somebody runs it at 60 FPS, the character's run speed will just double. They will be twice as fast as they should be. So you've got to decouple, you've got to actually do work as a developer to decouple the physics from the frame rate. FIFA does that pretty badly. Obviously, it's not going to double my character's sprint speed if I double my frames up here, right? It's not going to. But there are some ways in which it gets messy. Tech Dribbling in particular has this little glitch. If you try to tech, they'll do, like, this little stutter and they don't really get started. That's a glitch that happens at the higher frames. There are some other weird dribbling things. You try to do a skill move and they'll, like, pretend to cut one way. It's like it looks like a graphical glitch, but it's actually occurring on the screen. And that's just an issue. It's called the physics tick, as I understand. And the game's not registering the physics correctly with the frame rate, so 130 seems to be the cutoff there. 130 is also nice because my monitor's refresh rate is at 390. 130 is a multiple of 390, and it is nice. Normally you want, like, these to be the same, but of course I can't run 390 FPS. The game would break. It's just that poorly optimized. It's a shame. FIFA's just that bad. It should not be, but it is. So 390 FPS would be ideal, followed by 195 FPS, so half of 390 would be the next ideal, followed by a third or a fourth. So I've got it at a third. If you've got a 240 hertz monitor, maybe have this at 120 just to have that dividend, or that divisible number. So that can help. That is kind of system dependent, so do your own testing. 130 is the limit I want. You can't even put 130 here, so you've got to have it 130 in my other app anyway. If you can't hit 130, you're not on PC, you don't use that other app, you don't have an Nvidia card, all of those things, just do 120. But for my specific setup, 130's been what I've been running at. It's definitely been the best for me. And I believe that's going to be the end of all my PC settings, so, or excuse me, the console settings. So we'll leave that there. If you are just a console player, everything else is going to be PC specific, unless you have a DualSense controller and you can do some of my controller stuff. For what it's worth, I do have a third-party controller. Let me put this on screen over here. Back up. This will say, so it's got 1000 hertz polling rate, which is basically the fastest you can get for pretty much any realistic controller. It's 1 millisecond input lag. A normal Xbox controller will have 8 milliseconds input lag. A DS4 will by default have 4 milliseconds, although you can overclock these. I'm just preferring this one because they've got Hall sticks. They're magnetized, so they're a little bit faster and have less stick drift. I do minimize my sticks so that if you see here, I barely have to flick the stick at all, barely over to the side, nowhere near the edge. And you'll see there that I'm getting the 100% input. So that's just a faster response time. I don't have to, spend that extra millisecond or whatever it is, getting all the way from the center to the side. I'm just already getting max registration. It's not like I play the game in the center here. I still use the ends, but it eliminates a little bit of lag there. This isn't recommended for most games. Normally you want that fine control in the middle. FIFA, you don't. I never want my player to be like walking very slowly. I want them to be max pace, so that's something I do. Console, you probably can't do this. I think the DualSense controller, or the Pro controllers, excuse me, the DualSense Pro, whatever it's called, I think those controllers sometimes can, but the default controllers normally can't. And I've got a perfect circle dead zone. That's on my own preference. You don't need it. You can do the squircle. I've just used the circle myself. I also have hair triggers, which means I barely have to input anything here. You see I can't do any range except min or max, so I'm skipping all the things in the middle there as well. But again, like console on and not overclock it and not do any of those additional tweaks to it and be perfectly fine. It's all just preference in the end for that stuff. Now I will go through, let's pull up the RTSS Riva Tuner statistics, server, and kind of explain what's going on there. So MSI Afterburner is the application I've got to run the other thing. You pull this up, this is just like a monitoring software. I don't do anything with it, I promise. We open the settings, we go over to on-screen display, we go to more, that'll pull up RTSS. You got to add the application, so you've got to add FC26 up here. These are what I do. Like I say, the frame rate limiter is here at 130. Everything else, you want that low, everything else is off. And you go in here. The most important thing with those Nvidia cards, Nvidia Reflex is what makes this work. What this is the you can read all of that if you want to. The frame limiter in-game is it's the game first limiting and then it sends it to the GPU. This is skipping as I understand, this is skipping the game and going right to the GPU. So it's more direct. It's a better limiter than FIFA's. The limiter in here will add a little bit of input lag. The limiter in RTSS is just the fastest you can get. And again, this is what makes Windows borderless work, is that's what's needed for this the technology. But yeah, it's all a little bit complicated, but I've done my own testing between having this on and off, and it's very noticeable for me. Definitely want to have Reflex on if you can. This one's going to be up to you. It's up to your card, or up to your PC's quality. The default is auto. I've got after frame presentation. This feels slightly better to me. It won't depending on your system, so just do your own testing between the two. Auto is going to be fine if you don't want to mess with it. Yeah, that's all I do there. We'll go through my NVIDIA control panel settings there as well. So let's pull up here. You'll be able to see most settings videos you'll find for this stuff will have pretty much this exact stuff. Off on all of these, filtering, gamma correction. Gamma is going to be something to do with the sharpness or crispness of the lines that you'll see on the screen. That kind of stuff. I've got all that off. It's FIFA. I don't need graphics, I promise you. The important ones in here, fixed refresh. I do not use G-Sync. You can if you want to. It normally adds input lag. Some cases it doesn't. You'll have to do your own research on that kind of thing. Prefer max performance. The GPUs really you want running as high as you can anyway. This will be a little bit more of a power draw, but it's not that big of a difference normally. And again, I want my GPU running as high as I can. There's no real reason to have it lower. And actually, they can have some wear and tear, as I understand, if you have them run too low. You want Ultra on for low latency mode as well. This does basically what you think it would. Low latency, that's related to the input lag. Ultra is going to be the fastest setting you've got there. And here, if you read all the descriptions down here, it'll say, here, let me maximize this actually. Select on for higher performance. Select allow for higher performance. High performance is high performance. Select on for higher performance. Autos for old games, I think. Yeah, should be turned off for most older apps. Everything else off here pretty much. So you'll be able to copy mine. These are the kind of generic. Everybody tends to use these, but these are just the default accepted fastest. And believe me, I'm able to feel it when you swap some of these around. Definitely the fastest you're able to get there. The only other weird thing in here is if you want display scaling on or not. If you've got a modern monitor, almost certainly you want display scaling. Some of the old monitors, the GPU scaling used to be better than the display ones, but all the modern ones, they're able to handle it. So display scaling there, although no scaling should really be present because I'm using the monitor at its default resolution. 1080p as you're able to see here. And make sure your refresh rate is maximized in this menu. Sometimes people forget to change it there. I will drop the link both to last year's video. I'm not going to go through this too much because I'm personally using a different controller. But if I were to go back to the DS4, I would use this application called Lord of Mice. This was originally designed as a mouse overclocker. Now it's able to be used as the controller overclocker. Like I said, you won't see it here because it's not plugged in, but if I use the DS4, it's default at 250, which I think is 4 millisecond polling rate. If you put it, you can overclock the DS4 to 1000, which is going to be 1 millisecond. Definitely worth doing. A lot of pros for most games are doing this now. Just the controller overclocker. Basically, you'd find it in here. It'll show as an audio device, the controller will. You'd click on it, you'd hit filter on device, you'd maximize this. I think you do need to install service to get the driver in. And then you restart it turns the controller off and on again. And that'll overclock it, which means you get 3 additional milliseconds faster, depending on your controller, right? So I'll leave the link to that in the description as well. But beyond that, that's everything I do for the PC settings. So we've got both all the console in-game stuff and all my PC things down. So not really many changes from last year. Basically everything's the same, except the render scale setting here is new. I think everything else I have talked about in last year's video. So yeah, the game, the optimization stuff, I think the half frame rate, the render scale, DRS there, and the FPS target, I think these are what's going to help most people's stability. Definitely, and definitely don't go above 120 or 130 FPS. If you're trying to do 240, game's going to be an absolute mess for you, I promise. So hopefully you did all enjoy. If you did, like, comment, subscribe. Do feel free to ask any questions you've got for me in the comments there. And I will catch you all in the next one. Take it easy now. Peace.